Thanks very much for joining us. Labor's members of our Shadow National Security Committee have just been briefed by intelligence agencies about the situation in the Ukraine, and earlier this afternoon I spoke to the Prime Minister as well. This is a shocking development whereby we have a situation. Russia has undertaken aggression against the people of Ukraine, and all Australians stand with the people of Ukraine against Russian aggression. It is important in 2022 that Russia, along with other states, recognise national sovereignty of their fellow states. And what we see with the actions of Russia in militarily intervening across the border into Ukraine isn't the actions of peacekeepers, it's the actions of peace breakers. What we see with ongoing intimidation against the people of Ukraine is aggressive Russian action which undermines security in the region and indeed the world. And that's why it is appropriate that Australia has supported sanctions along with the United States, the United Kingdom and the European Union. It is absolutely vital that all nations which are democratic and which value the importance of a national sovereignty being respected take action in support of the people of Ukraine at this time. So Labor supports the announcement that's been made by the government. We believe it's very important when it comes to national security that we express a common view on behalf of the Australian people in support of democracy, in support of national sovereignty of Ukraine and against Russian aggression. And I've spoken as well to the leadership today of the Federation of Ukrainian Organisations here in Australia, who I met with just 11 days ago, and expressed our support for their family, their friends back in Ukraine who are going through this difficult time. Penny?
Thank you, Leader. Well, what the world is seeing is a unilateral act of aggression by Russia against a sovereign state. A unilateral act of aggression which is contrary to international law, which is contrary to international agreements, and which is contrary to the principles which have underpinned peace and prosperity since the end of World War II. I would say this: it is so important that Australia continue to act in lockstep with our partners, our international partners, in condemnation of this action and in the knowledge of the risk of this situation further deteriorating. So I echo the Leader's point that we do offer our full bipartisan support to the government on the sanctions which have been announced, and on Australia playing its full part as a member of the international community, standing in solidarity with Ukraine and with the Ukrainian community. I would also just make this point: we do know that there are Australians who remain in Ukraine. I would echo the government and Maurice Payne's views. It's important that it is time to leave, and it's important that you follow the advice on Smart Traveller and register with DFAT if you are in Ukraine.
Opposition Leader, do you support the types of sanctions introduced by the government? Do you think they go far enough? And realistically, do you think they'll have any impact on the Russian president's actions in Ukraine in the future?
Well, what they do is they send a very strong message that the world is united. And that's why it is important, and I believe appropriate, for Australia to act in concert with our allies and like-minded countries like the United States and the United Kingdom. So I do think it is appropriate, the actions that has been determined. But of course, President Biden has said that whatever Russia does next, the whole world is watching. The whole world is ready to respond with unity, with clarity and conviction. And that is a very strong statement from the President of the United States. Australia needs to work with our allies on this issue, as well as, of course, make sure, as Penny has said, make sure that we look after Australian citizens. We have told clear advice through the Department of Foreign Affairs that people should leave, and they should leave as a matter of urgency.
The Prime Minister earlier labelled Russia a thug and a bully. Do you agree with those sentiments, or do you think that's a bit inflammatory?
I'm not looking for any disagreement on these issues. Australians stand as one. Australians stand against the aggression, and the aggressor here is Vladimir Putin. It's not the people of Ukraine, it's not the government of Ukraine, it's not NATO, it's not the United States, it is Vladimir Putin and Russia. Someone who leads an authoritarian regime, someone who's engaged in aggressive action and threats against a sovereign state over recent months, and continues to escalate around the border of the Ukraine, and continues to escalate with military action and intervention, and calling it peacekeeping is of course quite farcical. It is anything but. This is a peace-breaking intervention in violation of international law.
Opposition leader, just on Ukrainians who may want to seek humanitarian aid or may want to come to Australia. I know the Prime Minister mentioned this morning that they are looking to fast-track visa applications. Do you think that's enough? Do you think we should look to perhaps even, establish a special visa for those who...
Well, they should be fast-tracked. There are a range of visas and applications which are in train now, and when I spoke to the Prime Minister I raised this issue with him, and what he indicated was that they would go to the top of the pile, all of those applications to come here. I also raised the issue of people who are here and whose visas might be time limited. We should not be sending anyone back to Ukraine also, and the Prime Minister agreed with that. We should keep a close eye on this and should be prepared to assist in terms of humanitarian programs. Australia has a good record going back when there's conflict in the world of playing our part, and we should be prepared to do that again.
The New South Wales Ukrainian Council has now called for Australia to take part in what they're calling lethal military assistance in Ukraine. What do you make of that?
Well, I haven't seen those reports, and I think it's important at times like this that we act upon advice. Australia is providing assistance in terms of cyber defence. We are providing that support, have been for a period of time, and these decisions should not be the subject of partisanship. What they should be is based upon considered advice by our intelligence agency, by our defence, by our Department of Foreign Affairs, and we'll continue to work constructively with the government to make sure that Australia plays our role as we are today. One of the reasons why we're standing up here today is once again to reaffirm our view that it's important to give Russia a clear message that all Australians stand united against Russian aggression and in support of the people and the country of Ukraine. Thanks.
The government has flagged concerns about possible retaliation from Russia, particularly in the area of cyber. You said you've received security briefings now. Should Australians be concerned about retaliation?
Well, we don't talk about the detail of the security briefings, of course. That's the first point I want to make. But very clearly, that would not be in the interest of Russia. Russia is the aggressor here, and any action against Australia will be seen as an act of aggression against Australia.
Senator Wong, as Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister, are you concerned that Beijing could use the current instability to launch its own action?
Oh, well, look, I would make this point. I've been asked that question a couple of times in the media already, that there is obviously a risk to global peace and security, to regional peace and security from an international actor, in this case Russia, blatantly violating international law, not respecting sovereignty, engaging in aggression that unilaterally alters the status quo, and that is why Australia, the United States, NATO nations and many more should continue to assert the principles we have in relation to Russian aggression in Ukraine.
Do you think the current sanctions are enough?
Look, we take advice from government about the scope of the sanctions that they are seeking to impose. We hope in doing that the government will, as Mr Albanese has said, recognise the importance of Australia taking a very clear stand on this matter.
Specifically, does Federal Labor support the introduction of the Australian agriculture visa? And if you were to form government, would you seek to scrap it?
Well, it's a mess. Scrap what? Nothing's happening. The Liberals and the Nationals are busy fighting each other. I got asked about this earlier today. What I know is that David Littleproud is complaining about the Liberal Party of which he's a part. You have cabinet ministers openly brawling about these circumstances, and it is just another example of the gap that is there between government announcements and government delivery. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.